Today we are going to learn about metacognition and the components of metacognition. So it is the definition, meaning, analysis of the definition, components and strategies. Let us look at the definition. Metacognition was the term given by John Flavel. In 1976, he coined the definition for it. So what he says is, in any kind of cognitive transition with the human or non-human environment, a variety of information processing activities may go on. Metacognition refers, among other things, to the active monitoring and consequent regulation and orchestration of these processes in relation to cognitive objects. Now, what he means to say is that while we are interacting with any other human being or in the environment, there are a lot of ideas, there are a lot of information that passes on from one person to the other. And when these things happen, we generally do not look at how our mind thinks, what is happening in our mind while we are interacting in the environment. So metacognition is a process of thinking that how we interact in the environment, what is our mode of asking questions or giving responses, how do we monitor it, regulate it, and make it more fruitful for us. So this was given by John Flavel in 1976. He identified what he believed to be the two elements of metacognition, that is knowledge of cognition and regulation of cognition. Now let us look at the components in metacognition. If we look at this metacognitive knowledge, it has three components. These three components are declarative knowledge, procedural knowledge, and conditional knowledge. Now you will think, what is declarative knowledge? Knowledge is a whole thing. So how do we divide it into these various forms? Declarative knowledge is understanding one's own capabilities. He also called it as person knowledge. This type of metacognitive knowledge is not always accurate, as an individual's self-assessment can easily be unreliable. Talking about procedural knowledge, this is known as task knowledge. This will include the content like what do I need to know, and the length of it, like how much space do I have to communicate what I know. So task knowledge is related to how difficult an individual perceives the task to be, as well as to their self-confidence. Strategy knowledge, like what you are thinking is right. And the conditional knowledge is known as strategy knowledge, and it is one's ability to use strategies to the learn information as well as adapting the strategies to a newer situation. Like we used a strategy once upon a time for a particular situation, and then when we meet the same situation again in life, we remember back those strategies and we try to use the strategies again. This is related to age or developmental stage of an individual. One more example that I would like to give you all. For example, a kindergartner can be taught strategies but needs to be reminded to use them, such as sounding out words like a, or words like apple, ape, etc. when learning to read. In contrast, an upper elementary student understands these strategies and knows when it will be effective under different circumstances. So there's a difference in conditional knowledge depending on the age of a person. Coming to the second component, which is metacognitive regulation, which is also called as self-regulation. It has three areas. It talks about the planning of oneself, the monitoring of one's own activities and behavior, and then evaluating it in the context whether it was right or wrong. So it is used to describe how individuals monitor and assess their knowledge. This includes knowing how and when to use certain skills and help individuals to control their learning. For example, this would be a student reflecting on his or her own work, a task that is assigned while in the classroom. Later, the individual can ask himself or herself how that task is being done by him or her, how it can be done more efficiently, more accurately. This would also be like, for example, when you give the exams, and then when post exam you start thinking about it, and then you realize how did you study, what was the strategy where when you studied you felt more relaxed, and when you were doing some kind of work and then you studied you felt more relaxed, or vice versa. So this could be in any of the ways. Coming to the third component, we will look at the two parts of it. So this is metacognitive experience, which talks about basically understanding the use of strategies and understanding the outcome because of those strategies. So these are the experiences an individual has through which knowledge is attained or through which regulation it has occurred. For example, you will know your own abilities to attain some kind of level in a particular exam, and therefore you study for the other exam also in the same way. So you have experienced in one area an outcome which has been fruitful. You use the same strategy. If you feel that the outcome was not fruitful, then you change your strategy. So this is the metacognitive experience that we generally find. There is also something called as meta memory, which is having the memory of whatever knowledge you had and how you remember things. So these skills develop over time and improve our way of looking at things, our behavior, and how we use those information later in life. Now, moving on to the next stage, that is, so this is in the nutshell, you can see metacognitive knowledge, knowing about oneself and how others act, and the cognitive processes. Regulation is learning the experiences through a set of activities that help people to control their learning, and metacognitive experiences are something to do with the current and ongoing cognitive behavior. Next is the strategies. What kind of strategies we can use to develop metacognition amongst children and students. This is also personally very helpful for us to understand how we think, how we learn, and therefore learning to learn. This is also known as mastery learning. So we master over our own learning techniques. So first one, we would talk about self-questioning. Did I do well? How did I do? If it was not done well, where did I go wrong? So all these things we try to question ourselves critically, reflect upon it, and then also try to think the strategies that we had used. Then KWL strategy, that is know what to know and then learn it, and then you get an outcome. So for example, you know that you need to do your work upon your handwriting. What to want to know it is how do I improve on my handwriting. Then you learn it, you practice it, probably you may join a calligraphy class or something to make it better, and you see the outcome. Another strategy, we call it as PQ4R. P is for preview, Q4 is questioning, and 4R is read, reflect, recite, and review. So questioning, we also saw over here self-questioning. This questioning also refers to being curious, asking questions when you don't understand, to the teacher, to the parent, to the person who is teaching you something, or with whom you want to ask these questions. Read about whatever you have learned already, for that would be for further information. Reflect upon it. This reflection is very important to look within, whether you are able to grasp that knowledge, whether you can relate it to your life, whether you can experiment upon it. Recite it. Now, this would be like trying to remember again and again what the knowledge was, and then review. Is there anything that can be changed, that can be modified? What went wrong? Or even if it is right, how do I make it better? And then the last strategy that we talk of is we can give it an acronym of IDEAL. So I stands for identity, D stands for define, E stands for explore, A for act, and L for look. So identity, or identifying something. You give a name to that problem situation, give a name to the event, give a name to that particular thing that you see, define it. After giving a name, you define, you explain it to yourself, what you saw, what you read, what you experienced. Then explore a little more upon it, try to find out about that thing, that situation, those people, those behaviors, or probably any other kind of information that you get. Act upon it. What would be your action after you explore? So, are you going to use it in your life? Can you apply it? Is it applicable for you? If it is not, why is it not? So, you act upon it. And then look at it again from a different point of view. Whether this application can be again re looked upon, used in some other situation, etc. So, students, these are some references that you can go on for by John Flavel, who has given us the concept of metacognition, and that is for the lecture today. Thank you so much. Kindly get back to me after you listen to this with your queries. So, thank you. Have a nice day.